The parameters of material instances are grouped by default under the types of each parameter, such as textures, scalars, and vectors. We can create our own groupings and sort the order of the parameters within each group, however. We can also specify the default values of each parameter, as well as setting the min and max values of those parameters. Let's go ahead and load up one of the material instances and take note of something here. You'll notice that these different parameters are grouped based on the type of parameter they are. So all the textures here are in a texture parameter group. Then we have the scalars in a scalar group. And finally, our vectors are in a vector parameter group. We can actually change the titles of these groups and organize our parameters the way we want them to be organized in the material editor. So let's close this down and look at how to do that. We'll go ahead and open up our master material again. Now in here, we're going to go to the top here for our color parameter. And when we select it under the details panel, under general here, you can see the parameter name, and then we have group and priority. So right now for group, it says none. And if we click the drop down, there's nothing else here. But we can actually change this by adding a new group, simply selecting none and typing the name of the group that we want. So for instance, we'll call this group base parameters. Now under base parameters, I'm going to include the color of the diffuse texture, but I'm also going to include the diffuse texture itself. So selecting that, we'll go back to group, use the drop down, and we can select base parameters. Going to do the same thing for the roughness and normal map textures. Now the other thing we want to do is set the priority of each of these so that they show up in the order that we want them in. So selecting color, the priority here is set to 0. That means it'll be the first one that shows up in the list. So next up, I'm going to set diffuse to a value of 1, making it the second value that shows up. Then roughness will set to 2, and normal map will set to 3. Now for the UV tiling, I'm going to put that in a group of its own. So we'll select UV tiling, and we'll create another group, and we'll call this group UV tiling. Since it's going to be the only one in the group, we'll leave its priority to 0. Then we'll do another group for the metallic and roughness values. Selecting that one, we're going to call this group multipliers. So for multipliers, we're going to leave that priority to 0. And then for roughness, we'll select it and choose multipliers from the dropdown and set the priority to 1. Let's go ahead and save that and see the result. We'll load up MI master material. And we can see base parameters. That's our group that has color, diffuse, roughness, and normal map. Then our multipliers, metallic and roughness, and in UV tiling. Back in the master material, we can set it up so that our parameters are limited to a certain range. So for instance, if we click on metallic here, and then we look under material expression scale parameter in the details panel here, we see we have a default value, a slider min, and a slider max. So right now the default value for metallic is 0. This means that when we load up a material instance, that parameter will be set to 0. If I wanted it to be set to 1, I'd simply select it and change that to 1. Slider min and max will allow us to control, obviously, the minimum and maximum values of this parameter. So for instance, if I don't want my metallic value to go above 1, I'd simply select slider max and set that to a value of 1. By setting the maximum limit here, slider min will now also have a minimum value of 0. So if I want it to go below 0, I'll need to specify that. So for instance, I'll set this to -1. Let's go ahead and save this and see the result. We'll open up a material instance and then go down to metallic, and then we'll drag the slider. We can see here that I can't go above 1, and I can't go below -1. Now that we know how to organize material instance parameters, let's look at a second type of material instance. While static material instances allow us to tweak materials quickly during the content creation process, dynamic material instances give us the ability to tweak those same materials at runtime.